Welcome to Queers Quills, the official podcast. I'm audiobook narrator Kirt Graves. Every episode, I invite an attending author or narrator to join me for a one-on-one conversation about their lives and their art, so attendees and readers from across the world can get to know them not only as professionals, but as people. Joining me today is Lee Blair. Lee Blair is a queer author and screenwriter from Oregon who writes low-angst, queer contemporary romance full of sweet, steam, fun, and laughs. She is constantly amused by the antics of her two ginger cats, spends too much time daydreaming about her next trip to Scotland, and considers starting hobbies its own hobby. I agree. Welcome to the podcast, Lee.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
It is so nice to have you here. So let's start from the very beginning. What was your author origin story?
I love this question. I like to think of my origin story in two waves. So there is when I got into romance and wanted to become a romance author. And then there is when I discovered I wanted to write queer romance and low angst. So many years ago, 20 years ago, oh my God, I was leaving college. I was starting my first full-time job, and I was reading for pleasure for the first time in years. Just I could read what I wanted instead of what my professor said I had to read. So I was reading tons of vampire fiction, and I had finished Anne Rice's books. And back then, Amazon had these recommendation pages where users could create their own lists of recommendations. And I was wanting more vampire books. And there was a page where someone had broken down by today's terminology, I would say they broke it down by vibes. And so If you're wanting dark and moody or historical and one of the recommendation sections was funny vampires. And I'd been watching vampire movies my whole life. It's alarming how many times I watched The Lost Boys as a young child. I love vampires, but I had never thought about them as funny. That those two things just didn't. It was just something so new to me. So I ordered this book. It was called A Girl's Guide to Vampires by Katie McAllister. And I am just reading it faster than I've ever read a book before. And I'm like, oh God, this is romantic. I didn't expect her. Why is there so much romance? But I like it. I had no idea. So I looked more into the author in the book, and she's a romance novelist. These are romance books. And back then, I'd never read a romance. I thought bodice rippers, Fabio, the whole thing. And so it immediately just clicked for me. I want to write romance. This is what I want to read. This is what I want to write. It's just everything clicked for me. And so at that point, I joined Romance Writers of America. Actually, another Queers and Quills author, Annabeth Albert, is a local author as well. And we met back then when I joined our local RWA chapter. So We've been writing many years. But it took me 10 years of false starts of not being able to finish a book and taking writing advice a little too seriously. Now looking back, you got to write every day, you got to plot, you have to do this. And then I went to Scotland and got an idea for a contemporary story and came home and just wrote it so quickly. And I got an agent after that. And decided, I think I want to do indie publishing. I don't think trad publishing is the best path for me. And so at that point, I'm still writing romance. It's, 2017, 2018, 2019. And I feel like I'm still, wanting to become a published author, but I'm writing straight male, female romance. At that time, I thought I was straight. And so the second part of the origin story comes into play. I joined TikTok in late 2019 for my day job to do some monitoring of our brand. My day job is communications. And that algorithm, I'll tell ya, was like, hey girl, you thought you were straight. It did. It was you thought you understood yourself for a few decades. Within 2 days, we're telling you, maybe you don't. And so, late 2019 into early 2020, I had my own bi-awakening, and then the pandemic was hitting. And so meanwhile, I had several friends who'd been telling me for years, you got to watch Schitt's Creek. you have to watch it. And the more someone tells me to watch or read something, the less I'm going to, because I can be very contrary with my Taurus sun and my Scorpio rising. I'm like, nope. But at that point, the pandemic, the series had just ended with its final season. So I thought I can binge it. I can, really get into it. So I decided I was trying to finish a master's thesis, and I thought, when that's done, I'm going to treat myself by watching Schitt's Creek. And that night, after defending virtually because of, June 2020, sure, I was just sitting at home alone. I'm like, okay, I guess I have a master's now. Well, I guess I'll watch Schitt's Creek. I watched all 6 seasons in a week, and then I watched it twice through again in the next 2 weeks. And a local writer friend had been writing fan fiction, and so she had sent me some of her fanfic, and that was my first entry into fandom. So I just started binge reading as much as I can get my hands on, and then I started writing fanfic. And so I'd been writing romance for 15 years at that point, but this was my first time with queer romance, because it was a David Patrick storyline, and it was allowing me to sort of step away from the structure of how I was taught how to write romance, which is basically like medium angst. And so in that time in the fandom space, I'm seeing the word angst being thrown around, and I never really had encountered that as part of the vernacular in, all the training and Romance Writers of America stuff I'd done all those years. And so I thought, I'd see people say, well, can I have some high angst recommendations? Can I have some low angst recommendations? I'm like, low angst? What is that? And then it just started this new discovery, and I started reading original queer romance, and then I really just found that pocket of queer romance, low angst, and it just all came together so well.
That's awesome. What was your first queer romance book that you published?
Oh, that I published. I thought you were going to say what I read. I'm like, oh gosh, there's been so many. I don't remember.
I wouldn't make you recall that.
So it was called Just Watch Me. It was a novella. So the first book that I published wasn't until late 2021. It was late December, and it was a cozy mystery under a different pen name. But it took me 16 years to get that first one out. And then a month later, in January of 22, I published the first romance. And I think since then I think I'm about to release like number 14 or number 15. So it really it took me 10 years to write a full draft of something. And then I was moving a little faster with straight MF. And then I got the queer romance, and I'm like, and low angst. And it's just like moving.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, and I'm glad you shared that, because I think sometimes we can feel like the times when we're not producing a finished product is wasted. When in reality, it's all a part of our journey to creating something ultimately. Whether the things we worked on for all those years ever comes to fruition, it was building us as an artist. And it's not wasted time. And if you are in the part of the process in which you are still learning how to do it and learning how to finish, which can sometimes be the hardest part, you're still an artist. You're still working towards something. So don't lose hope. It can still happen.
That's such a great point. I love that so much. And that makes me think of when people call themselves aspiring authors or aspiring screenwriters. If you've written something, you're an author, you're a screenwriter. There doesn't need to be this arbitrary external gatekeeping or validation that tells you that you've achieved something. If you've written something, you've made art.
Yeah, you're in process.
Yeah.
Which aren't we all?
Yes.
Aren't we all? So, I think you've already touched on it, but I will ask in case you want to expand on it a little bit more, why writing queer characters clicked for you and why it's something that you're passionate about still.
I would say to dive a little deeper into that, the low angst combined with queerness is a really important element to me, because as I discovered my own queerness in late 2019, early 2020, it wasn't like I had an inkling my whole life. So it wasn't like it was in the background and I was just a really strong ally who loved rainbows, but I, tried to catch up on knowledge and educate myself about these spaces. And I was really starting to notice that the bury your gaze trope and like, oh gosh, yeah, like everything feels heavy and tragic, or the queer character is a means to get the straight character somewhere. Often like women are killed off in stories to, get a man where he needs to be, like that type of stuff. So as I was exploring low angst, what I really love about it is it's just queer characters existing as any other person and getting happiness, having wonderful things happen to them. And that really appeals to me, is just being able to just show characters just finding love and living life. And there doesn't have to be anything really heavy or dark or sad. There's places for that as well. But it's also nice to just see people thriving and being happy.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to acknowledge. There's a place for both things.
Yeah.
And because sometimes you need one thing and sometimes you need the other. Or sometimes you need one thing, but other people need the other. I often say that as much as I love, books about queer joy and like building worlds where homophobia doesn't exist, that's great for us. That's great for queer people to be able to live in that type of utopia for a little while. And that's really good for us. If straight people are reading that and thinking that's the world we live in, then we have a problem.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point.
The books that are written where those struggles are still a part of the world, straight people need those. They need those books. They need to know what we've gone through, so that reading and the art form of writing can build empathy.
Yes.
Sometimes we need escapism. Sometimes we need to build empathy.
I totally
and it's why
agree.
it's important for all of us as consumers of books to seek out stories that are different from our own, and that sometimes make us uncomfortable. So. Yeah, we do need both. Speaking of safe places, you've set most of your books in the same town.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us more about the books you've written and more about that setting?
Yeah, sure. Yes, exactly. Speaking of queer utopia, I think I was sort of inspired by Schitt's Creek in a way, because looking back at that show, and the creator, Dan Levy, talks about that. Like, this is a town where, yeah, there's some messed up people, but there's not homophobia, there's not racism, there's not sexism, fat phobia, like all of these things don't exist in the same way. It's people's struggles, but not with that. And I really like that. I've been doing Clifton Strengths work. I really like psychometric tests. I've been doing that since 2018. And my number one strength is positivity. And my number two is empathy. So when working with my coach back in 2018, 2019, she's like, if you could find a way to write happy stuff, I think you would be happy, because you're spending so much time creating that if you're trying to write dark, heavy stuff, that's going to affect you. And I think that's why I like this town so much. So it's a fictional town in Oregon called Dahlia Springs. And I'm born and raised in Oregon, love it out here. And what I like about it is there are some goofy people. It's small town shenanigans, it's gossip, it's nosiness, but it's also just, you're not looked at for being queer. If you're walking down the street holding hands with someone, people don't take a second glance. It just feels welcoming. And so all these books, most of my books are set there, and they're all standalone romances, but you will see some recurring characters in the same town. So the town very much like is a character in my books, which I enjoy as a reader as well.
Yeah. And those are great fun. I did a series, I'm not remembering the pseudonym the author used for this series. It's called Lavender Shores. I don't want to out the real author if he doesn't want to be outed.
I tried to remember the pen name.
I can't remember the pen name for those books. But anyways, it was very much that situation where it was like a fictional town where, homophobia just didn't exist. And it was lovely. It was lovely to have that escapism, in the storytelling. And it's also really fun to imagine a town where like queer people flock to it because it's known. It's because it seems a little out there, like, oh, sure, everybody's gay. And it's like, well, if you make a place that's known for being friendly and welcoming and prosperous for queer people, guess what's going to happen? Everybody's going to be gay. So
yeah. It's so true. Actually, the series that I've been working on, it's a new town. It's called Maplewood in Vermont. And so two other Queers and Quills authors, Bick Sparrow and Anna Ashley, are also in this series. And there's 10 of us. And the whole premise of the town, Maplewood, is Vermont's queerest town. It was created, in the 19th century by people who were feeling out of place in their communities. And so they moved in, started a new community. And exactly what you said, like just over time, it gets a reputation for being a wonderful, welcoming, safe place. And there's a lot of queer people who live in that town.
Yeah. It could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope to find that town someday.
Me
My
too.
friends and I all talk about starting a commune somewhere, someday. Like maybe one of these places just needs to exist and advertise and be affordable.
Yeah, that's the key thing. Affordable. Yes, that would be really nice.
Yeah. Have you had any other influences, be they media or writers that you are particularly inspired by?
So other than the ones I talked about, the Girl's Guide to Vampires and then Schitt's Creek, I would say when I started reading original queer romance, there were a few authors who were writing in kind of that corner that I could picture myself in, of just, so K.M. Newhold, Isla Olson are two authors who were among the first ones I was reading. And I really loved the friend groups, the family closeness, the overlapping timelines of if something is happening in this book and you see something happening in the background that comes in the next book. And just, there's still conflict and tension without heartache and heartbreak. And the tension might be coming from the people in the romance working together to solve an external issue. And so authors like that were really inspiring to me because it was helping me articulate what I was writing in my fanfic, which was just such a nice break from this like years and years and years of structure, that the fanfic was a reset. And then finding original authors I was gravitating toward as a reader was just really helping me articulate my voice and my style. So they especially were really great. And then since then, like AJ Truman is amazing, and a lot of his books similarly, it's just got like that vibe of the small town, the friend groups, the teasing, the connection, the emotional depth with the lightness. Because I think there's a lot of assumption that you need angst and heaviness and darkness to have a satisfying emotional story. And there are so many low angst authors out there who prove that that's not the case. You can have a little bit of escape from the horrors of reality, but still get that satisfying emotional payoff.
Yeah, I love that. So if someone was coming to your work for the first time today, is there a particular work or series that you would point them to and say, this is a really great place to go to understand who I am as a writer?
Yeah, I would say that my Tap That Brewery series within my Dahlia Springs universe. So like I said, every book is standalone.
I see what you did there.
I love puns so much. The first book is pitcher perfect, like a beer pitcher, sure, in case in case I'm not articulating well. I would say that one is a good place to start because you get the friends, the teasing is a love language, the introduction to the small town, and the like recurring characters that come up. And then the brewery guys are in a lot of the other books. I would say starting there would be fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have mixed feelings about books like that because one, I love them. As a gay man who's just reading the books and enjoying them, I think that's so cool. And like, I long for that day. As a narrator, it makes me start to sweat whenever we talk about a place where there's a bunch of people and it's all guys and they all hang out together. And you just know in every book, there's going to be a scene where 14 different characters are all talking and you're like, oh boy, here we go. And then as the anthologies continue, they're just adding more people. I just get a little sweaty every time we talk about it because it's like, oh no, it's so hard to do those scenes.
I've thought about that, like what would this be like to narrate my books? Because that's exactly what I do. As I keep growing to the town, and there's little references, and I can't imagine of being a narrator and trying to think, well, how did I do this character's voice in this book, and then making sure, if you've got a bunch of people in a scene, I bet your job is very difficult.
The more people who are there, the harder it is to make them all sound different. you know?
Yeah.
So, and especially because sometimes it's like they're all brothers, or they're cousins. And I was like, oh, great. They're all people who are related to each other. They grew up in the same place. Like, what? Like I said, I get sweaty. I get sweaty thinking about it. But so I have also invited you here to play a game. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
All right. So the
Excited.
rules of our game are simple. I have a deck of cards, and on each card is a question. The questions aim to learn more about you as a person. So some are biographical, some are hypothetical, some are just plain silly. But I will not be picking the questions you're going to answer. Fate is going to do that for us. So I'm going to deal 3 cards every round. You pick one. And whatever card you pick, you're agreeing to answer the question on the card, with a couple of exceptions. So if a question comes along that you don't want to answer, you have 2 opportunities to switch things up. You can turn the tables on me one time, forcing me to answer the question, or you can also discard a personal question in favor of answering a more bookish question from our white deck. But in that case, only 1 card gets dealt, and you have to answer it.
Oh, I love
Dun,
it.
dun, dun.
It's like bookish truth or dare.
Yeah, you never know what you might get. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Card 1, card 2, or card 3?
Let's go with 3.
All right. Which body part do you wish you could detach, and why?
Detach. Oh. My brain is going in a lot of weird places. So I'll just stream of consciousness. I think it would be interesting to detach my head to be able to look at things in different angles. So I think about this is going in such a weird direction. But a gift I got from my dad for Christmas, I think last year, was something I saw on TikTok where it was this like bendy thing you could attach to a screwdriver to help you screw things around corners. And so my brain just made a bunch of leaps of if I could take my head off, but still somehow my body be able to navigate without sight and touch and the senses that my brain provides. It would be helpful to be able to just look in different directions or set my head down and be able to see something or hear something and then walk away. Yeah.
For sure. That actually makes so much sense. Also, not only did I see those ads on TikTok, I bought those bendy things for my screwdriver. And it came in very handy when we had to replace the microwave in our kitchen.
There you go.
Because those were long screws in a very tight space. And I was like, I have just the tool. TikTok knew.
I love that. TikTok knows everything.
TikTok knows. All right. Card 1, card 2, or card 3?
Let's go 2.
Back in high school, what was the strangest thing someone would find in your locker?
Oh. I'm trying to remember what I would even put in my locker. Probably like food I forgot about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know that I used my locker. Yeah, because I don't think I stored a lot in my locker. I was more of the backpack full of stuff that was probably causing back issues type of person. I was in a lot of clubs and like overachiever extraordinaire. And so I would just always have a heavy bag with a lot of stuff with me. So I don't know how much I put stuff in the locker, but I could definitely, knowing myself, I would say that's likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a terrible locker in high school. And when you were assigned a locker, you got it for all 4 years. And so it was in the basement. It was like it was nowhere near any, the ground floor of my school is where like the shop classes were, the health classes, the business, like home business, home ec, like that's where all of that was. So like I did go to my health class my sophomore year near my locker. Otherwise, I never went down there. And so it was a terrible place for my locker to be. And it was pretty normal for people to like seek out friends based on where their lockers were and share. And we there were these shelves that you could buy, like somebody was fashioning them out of like plywood, and you could put them in the locker. They fit perfectly, and then every person had a shelf. So you're going around like bargaining for good locker space. So I actually used my friend Michael's locker for most of my high school career. I had a little shelf there. I carried most of my stuff in my backpack. So the weirdest thing you might have found in my actual locker is like any of my possessions. Because I never went down there. I never went down there. More than 1 year, I had to go get the janitor at the end of the year to remind me what my code was, because I never used it. But I was like, I better check to make sure if there's anything in there.
Yeah. What a horrible spot to put lockers in.
Well, you know, I grew up in a fairly small town, but like we had fairly large high schools.
Oh,
So
interesting.
there were about 2,000 kids in my high school. And so, yeah, they had to put lockers wherever there was a hallway.
That makes sense.
There was no other choice. But yeah, for me personally, it was a terrible spot because I just never went down there.
Oh,
It's also where like the computer lab was and stuff like that. And I
okay.
was like, I wasn't taking those classes. I was doing the arts and like all the languages and
Hmm.
the AP courses for lit and stuff like that. Like that wasn't my vibe.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's such a bummer you couldn't just swap it out.
yeah,
And so that
it
someone
was
who did take those classes could have their
right.
locker close to
Could have a
them.
really convenient locker right there.
Yeah.
It was right by an entrance that I never came in because I was like, no, I don't come from there. So, all right, card 1, card 2, or card 3.
One.
What is the trait you most deplore in yourself?
Oh. I know that it's not blamed on astrology, but I'm going to blame it on astrology. My Scorpio rising, I can get a little, and I guess it's also stubbornness for my Taurus sun. Um, Sometimes I could get defensive quickly, like internally, of just kind of, what's the phrase? Batten down the hatches? Is it batten?
Yeah.
One of those things that you hear once in a while,
Right.
but not often enough to, as soon as you start to say it, you're like, I no longer feel confident. I'm knowing how to say this. But I would say that can be frustrating of if I'm feeling salty about something. It takes me a while to get there. That number one, positivity, and number two, empathy, I can really go with the flow. But once I get somewhere, I have a hard time pulling myself back, which is frustrating because I like to stay in a happier place. So I wish I could change that about myself. Either care less, or if I get upset, move away from it quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also a Scorpio. So I wonder if that's part of it too. Mostly I think it's the OCD because I got diagnosed later in life. And like one of the questions that the therapist asked me is like, do you sometimes feel that there's only one right way to do things? And I was like, doesn't everybody? And I was like, no. And I was like, oh, I suddenly understand some of my husband's frustrations more than I did before this. I was like, so he doesn't think there's a right way to do things and you have to do it that way? I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's fun reaching the end of these interviews because I know I'm never going to have any of these questions come back because they just won't cycle back through. So I can actually talk about them now. For like the first, 3/4 of these, I had to shut my mouth because I was like, just in case the question comes around and they turn it around on me, I have to
That's
save my
point.
answers. Now I can just discuss things freely. I was like,
I love it. Let's get
these
the
questions
juice,
are going to the
the
bottom of
tea.
the deck. They won't come back. All right. Card 1, card 2, or card 3?
2.
That's too similar to the last one. Ooh, who is your favorite hero of fiction?
Oh, goodness. Favorite hero of fiction? Would that count movies as well or books?
Yeah, any fiction.
Any fiction. So I never have gotten into traditional movies, books, TV that have like formally a hero structure of like superhero movies or things like that. I'm not really drawn to that. Most of my media consumption, okay, this is going to tell you a lot about who I am as a person. It's true crime or Hallmark movies. There is no in between. Those are my happy extremes. So I would say the heroes who come to mind are crime solvers, whether that is like sleuths who solve things, who aren't going to put up with law enforcement having tunnel vision, or detectives, or whoever it is. Like, I think that there's like an everyday hero element of when something horrific has happened to a person and there are people out there willing to put themselves on the line, their safety on the line, to share what they've witnessed, or people solving crimes. So there's not like a specific person who comes to mind, but there's an archetype, I think, in fiction. I love cozy mysteries, so I love the amateur sleuth who is out there trying to solve crimes. Or one of the tropes I love is, the police have it wrong. This is they're not listening to this. And so then the do-gooder with a little bit too much time on their hands kind of goes in and solves the crime. I love that.
So
Yeah.
do you like any like fictional crime solving shows, or is it just true crime and Hallmark movies?
I do like some fictional crime solving shows. The one I watch, sometimes I go through binges actually, where I'll get on a few British crime shows, and then I'll just kind of see what Netflix or BritBox or something has, and then I move back to my true crime. I'm usually doing writing or something while I have the TV going, so it's easier for me to just have background true crime. But the fictional ones, recently I watched Adolescence, which is taking over. I don't remember if that was Netflix or wherever, but that was a really interesting one. Have you heard of anything about that one or seen it?
I'm waiting to watch it basically until there's more sunlight in the day, because it seems like the kind of thing I need more sunlight in my life to consume. But it sounds excellent, and I look forward to watching it.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's just a different take. It's got a different feel than a lot of stuff. But I watched that recently, and that was an interesting one. But I can't remember the name of it. There was one that was a British one that came out in the last year that I watched recently, and it had a really great detective in it, but I don't remember what it is. So that's not a very good one if I can't remember the name.
I'm wondering if you have a strong opinion about this. Do you like it when you, the viewer, knows what happened up front and then you watch somebody unravel it? Or do you prefer to unravel it with the protagonist as you watch?
Kurt, thank you for this question. I think about this so often as someone who I still write cozy mysteries. And I think about that a lot. Like as a reader, do I want them to suspect or do I want them to be surprised? And same for myself as a consumer. I enjoy the know-it-all feeling of, I know what happened. So I think that's my preference, is to be able to guess. But the big caveat, I want to be surprised by the motive. So if I figure out like, oh, I feel like this person did it, but it could be a half a dozen reasons why, or there's a really juicy twist that's unknown. Yes. That to me is the most satisfying. What about you?
I much prefer to not know. I want to solve the mystery as I watch with everyone else. But the real answer is, if it's well done, I can enjoy it both ways. Like one of my favorite shows of a couple years ago was Poker Face on Peacock with Natasha Lyonne playing somebody who can just always tell when somebody's lying. And so it's sort of like a Columbo framework where like we watch the crime happen and then she enters the story and figures it out. Like we bounce back in time. Elsbeth is another one that's airing right now on CBS, where like you watch the crime happen and then we watch her figure it out. But in both cases, like they're very well written characters. And so we're interested in them and their connection to it and their process. So I can enjoy that. But otherwise, I would prefer to solve the mystery along. But see, that has to be well done too, because if we're watching it and they're setting up all of the pins to fall down a certain way, and then in the third act they introduce something new that like we couldn't have possibly known about. I just stopped watching a show, Black Doves on Netflix, because like I think it was like 6 episodes, and like on the 4th episode they suddenly introduced like a Chinese gang that might have been behind everything, and I was like, I'm done.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, nope, I'm walking away from it, because if like we're suddenly introducing a new element this far in, and everything I've been thinking and like trying to figure out is just nothing anymore, I was like, I don't like that. So
no.
So it can be well done either way.
Yep. I 100% agree with you. It's infuriating when that stuff is introduced at the end. It needs to be set up. I think about that a lot, like, the craft advice for creating mysteries it sort of influences how I read as well, because I'm like, oh, I know what you're trying to do. And you don't want to show the bad person too many times, but you don't want to do not enough, because then they're a surprise. So you have to find that like middle ground. And so then I find myself assessing that of, okay, has this person been talked about too often where they won't be the bad person? But yeah, it's tricky. As long as the character motivation is there and it's compelling. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I just saw a friend in a play the other day, and it was a mystery. But early in the play, the suspect is described as having about your build, and he points to a guy. And I was like, that was either an obvious misdirect or they just told us who the killer was. And it turned out that they just told us who the killer was. But it's also like, it's a stage play. We see the killer, and even though he's dressed in all black with a mask, it's like, yeah, that's the same guy. Like we can see his size and shape. We know that that's the same person.
Oh no.
And they never appear on stage together, which was another issue with the writing that I had, because he was the only person in that group who never appeared on stage with the killer. It was like, were we not supposed to figure this out? So mysteries are hard, but there are certainly some things you can do, and that's why you should have people read them so they can give you some feedback.
Absolutely. Or you've got the crime solver, especially in the amateur sleuth space, who just keeps stumbling upon things instead of actively trying to solve the crime. They just are like, I'm just out shopping. And this happens a lot in cozies because you just frequently, there's a trope of just the bumbling sleuth, and they're just out and about and discover. I'm like, no, I want people active. I want agency. Yeah.
Well, this has been fascinating. We're way over time, so hopefully folks enjoyed this longer episode. But thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me. I really enjoyed it.
I really did too. Thank you so much. This is great. I love the questions on the cards. That was fun.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And thank you, listeners, for joining us for Queers and Quills, the official podcast. If you're already signed up to attend Queers and Quills, make sure to say hello to me and to Lee at the Oregon Convention Center in May. And if you're not, follow Queers and Quills on Instagram so you can see all the fun we're having this year and get updates about ticket availability in the future. Until next time, I'm Kirt Graves, and I hope you're having a very gay day. Queers and Quills, the official podcast, is produced and hosted by Kirt Graves, in coordination with Mahogany Mail and Marley Valentine. All copyrighted material is shared with permission. Music and sound effects are licensed through Storyblocks Audio. All opinions shared are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions or policies of any company or organization with which they happen to be associated.